What's up, everybody? Good afternoon. It is still Victory Tuesday, but I gotta tell you guys, the Seattle Seahawks have a problem. The Seattle Seahawks have a problem that may not manifest itself right now. It might not manifest itself later this season. In fact, we probably won't see it do anything until this offseason and next season, but the Seahawks have a problem. Let's talk about it. Let's go through it here. Let's dissect the problem here. So, saw this tweet earlier this morning from Brady Henderson. ESPN's pass block win rate. It's one of many stats that I think are good to use when trying to evaluate offensive lines and offensive linemen. The Seahawks currently rank 11th in ESPN's pass block win rate through 4 games. So, above average to good in pass block win rate. Now, on top of that, let's take a look at some other stats while we're here, because we need more in order to have full context. In rushing yards per game, the Seattle Seahawks are 16th in the league with 108.5 yards per game. 108.5 yards per game, which is 16th in the league. So right smack dab in the middle, average. In yards per rush, the Seahawks are a little above average. You can see that there are several teams still well ahead of them, but 4.4 yards per carry still puts them in the average to slightly above average territory in the league. They're like 14th. So in that area, they are pretty good. So all these numbers we're looking at, the Seahawks are average to above average, maybe even approaching good. And then you have a couple areas where they're actually really good. Sacks allowed. You go on to StatMuse, which teams have allowed the most sacks through 4 games. Seattle is very low on this list. In fact, there are only 6 teams in the entire NFL that have allowed fewer sacks than the Seahawks, 7 through 4 games. They are allowing less than 2 sacks a game. There are only half a dozen teams in the league that have allowed less. So they are one of the best teams in the league in not allowing their quarterbacks to get sacked through 4 games. Oh, and the big one, the really important one, they are 6th in points scored per game at about 27.8. And that's with one of the worst kickers in the league so far. So all these stats point towards the same thing. This offense is playing really well. Maybe it's not elite, but it is very, very good. Why is this relevant? Because I think we all kind of knew that. We all kind of understand this offense is playing well right now. But what are the pieces on this offense, the offensive line especially, that are allowing this to happen? It's not the guys that we thought we were going to have starting and playing for us before the season started. I can tell you that. Let's take a look at some of these guys that have gotten on the field for the Seahawks so far, a little more individually. Stone Forsythe, 6th round pick a couple years ago, dismissed by 98% of people as not an NFL caliber player, gets forced into action after like a half plus a couple of plays. He's played 213 snaps so far this season at left tackle. Adequate, solid, effective, about a 60 PFF grade overall. Allowed 13 pressures across about 3.5 games. Not perfect, not great. Maybe you could even argue not even good, but good enough. You can win with him, as we've proven. You can score with him. He is not anchoring your offense down to below average play. He's good enough. Evan Brown had to bump over to left guard yesterday and a little bit in the previous game because of injuries. People kept getting hurt. Damian Lewis goes down. Evan Brown at left guard's all you can do. Adequate. Good enough. Capable. Solid. Obviously, you'd rather have him at center. He's a better center than a guard. But he bumps over to left guard and plays most of that game out of position last night. And he plays fine. Not over the top. Not anything crazy. But his play doesn't have some massive drop-off when he bumps over. This is not the guy you thought was going to be playing left guard for you this season, but last night you needed him against a really good interior defense, and he was fine. He's been fine. You even want to throw Ben Brown in here, and I know it's only 8 snaps, but that's 8 more snaps than I thought Ben Brown was going to play this year, and he's been fine. Not anything over the top great, not anything elite, but when we've needed him, he's been adequate. He gets the job done. So, Ben Brown, another guy who is fine. And for a lot of these guys, especially when they're playing out of position, especially when they're being called on off the bench cold, fine is more than fine. We say it's fine, but it's really great because there's only so much you can expect from a backup coming in cold off the bench last night in a nationally televised game or against a really tough defensive front, and then they get out there and they grind. Oluwatimi, what a look at this guy. He gets forced into action twice this year. For most of the game last night, he's fine. 57 grade, not anything crazy good. No pressures allowed, really good pass blocking stats. Obviously, the run blocking needs some work, but this is a guy who I wasn't expecting to play very much, if at all, this season. And if he was going to play, I thought it would be by the end of the year. But he's forced out there. He's playing with backups all up and down the offensive line. He's in charge of making the blocking signals for his teammates. And he's fine. No penalties, no sacks allowed. If this is what you get from a 5th-round rookie in his first real NFL action, that's something that's got to get everybody excited, man. So, Oluwatimi, backup, rookie, 5th-round center, goes out there and he's fine. The one guy we're looking at today who arguably has not been fine is Anthony Bradford, but that's just from penalties. We all know that Bradford with the penalties is getting his grade smacked around a little bit here. His run blocking grade is noticeably off, I think because of the holding call last night. But we've been watching these games. Anthony Bradford's been fine. Like, this grade be damned. He's allowed 3 total pressures across over 120 snaps. He's allowed our run game to still be effective despite him being in the game. It's not like we can't run the ball every time Bradford goes in. He's picked up a couple penalties, and that's dinged him a little bit. But for a rookie who you took in the 4th round, who I think most people looked at as a developmental player, yeah, Anthony Bradford playing fine. And that's kind of the key word here. None of these guys are looking like superstars. None of these guys are setting the world on fire. But they're all pretty much fine. They make mistakes occasionally. They get beat occasionally. But they're not allowing this ship to sink. And what else can you ask for from a bunch of backup players? Guys who we didn't think were going to play at all this season. Jake Curhan. I know he was bad last night. I know he had a bad game last night. But on the whole, he has been, wait for it, fine. 58.6 PFF grade is workable. This is a UDFA player. This is a guy who was not drafted. 3rd year in the league. He played fine. And given the fact that you're plugging him in at right tackle for Abraham Lucas, who everyone loves, everyone's into, everyone's a big fan of all that. Yeah, there have been problems. He's allowed a lot of pressures, almost 20 pressures through 216 snaps. He committed a penalty last night that took away a decent play, allowed a couple sacks last night, but overall you look at Jake Curhan and you still go, yeah, he's been fine. And who does all of this go back to? You might say Shane Waldron, and you've got a point there, but really, what about Andy Dickerson? This guy's starting to get some real hype. I'm seeing his name brought up a lot in comments. I'm seeing his name get brought up a lot on Facebook and X and Reddit. People are starting to really figure this stuff out with Andy Dickerson. But seriously, guys, there's something really brewing here. This offensive line played above their heads last year. And then in the offseason, most sites said the Seahawks had one of the worst offensive lines in the league. Most websites like PFF and ESPN, all those types of websites said the Seahawks offensive line was still one of the worst in the league. It has been better than average with a bunch of backups and guys playing out of position for most of the season. There has been zero stability on that offensive line. And yet, We're doing well in pass blocking. We're doing okay in run blocking. We're not allowing a lot of sacks and QB hits, and the offense is scoring at a very successful clip. We'd be a top 5 offense if we didn't have a garbage kicker. So, Andy Dickerson, it's time to start talking about this guy too. And here is the problem. I said at the start of this video, the Seahawks have a problem. There is no way the Seahawks are going to be able to keep Shane Waldron and Andy Dickerson. Maybe we keep Waldron, but we're going to lose Dickerson because he's going to get a chance to be an offensive coordinator. The only way you could keep both would be if Pete Carroll retires, Waldron becomes head coach, and Dickerson becomes his offensive coordinator. Because other than that, you're looking at a situation where maybe Waldron gets hired away as a head coach, and then Dickerson gets promoted. So that way you lose Waldron, keep Dickerson. You could lose both. What if Waldron gets hired as a head coach and takes Dickerson with him to be his offensive coordinator? And of course, there's some possibility that you are able to keep Waldron, but you're probably going to lose Dickerson then. So there's no way we're going to be able to keep both of those guys because they're both doing a great job. Waldron is doing amazing work with a very, very limited group of personnel because of all these injuries. And Dickerson is right there holding his hand. So that's the problem. It's the kind of problem that good teams have. Your coaches are too good. They're overqualified for their position. Somebody takes them away from you. But this is a problem. These guys are not playing, excuse me. These guys are coaching so well right now. We're not going to be able to keep all of them. Somebody is going to give these guys a promotion. And we're going to have conversations later on this year about what the Seahawks can do to replace these guys if they do lose them. Obviously, I think the go-to will be Waldron's going to get hired away as a head coach after this season if things keep up. He's doing too well to not get the head coaching nod from somewhere. And then Dickerson gets promoted to our offensive coordinator, and then we go from there. That may end up being the preferred outcome, but I'm just saying it right now. If this keeps up, if these guys continue to perform at this level, if we continue to have a top offense, imagine how good it could be when these guys get back, by the way. If we can get any semblance of health going on the offensive line going forward, imagine how good it could be then. I'm not seeing any way that Waldron remains an offensive coordinator next year or that Andy Dickerson remains an offensive line coach next year. Those guys are killing it. They need a promotion, and we may not be able to give it to them. We may not be the team to give it to them. So don't be surprised if Waldron is a head coach in New Orleans or a place like Las Vegas next year, and he takes Dickerson with him. So yeah, that's the problem the Seahawks are going to have. But for the moment, it's pretty dang sweet. So it's not going to be a problem until later, but the problem is coming. In the meantime, appreciate the greatness that we're getting from these two guys. See you guys later. Go Hawks. Might be another video later today. Definitely going to stream with the Hawks Nest tonight. Hope to see you guys there.